This episode of Legends the Series is brought to you by these fine companies.
All the time that you're racing in modified or going to the races and be a racer wannabe, and then when the opportunity comes, boy, it's a check. Like, I don't know, man, that's now all of a sudden. One of the funny stories is my wife's dad said, when we were going to do this, he said, "Well, yeah, I know you're going to race, but what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to race." "No, but what are you going to do for a job? What are you going to do to make a living? You're going to leave here and you're going to..." I'm like, "Well, no, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to race." And then the reality of it is, yeah, wow. Now though, am I really ready for this? Is it really something I can pull off, you know? As a kid, I was competitive. I had a brother that was about a year and a half older than me, and he was bigger and stronger. And of course, all the time that you're growing up, that couple years is a big difference. In high school sports, he would be a sophomore. He was only one grade ahead of me in school, but he was older and bigger. But anyway, he just made me competitive. And as a person, when I had a bicycle that I had cardboard on the spokes so it would make noise, and I just had a go-kart that had a couple engines on it. I was fascinated with speed and power, and my dad was a mechanic, so I always looked up to him, and I'd see what he was working on, what he was tinkering with, and if something was broke, he'd be the Johnny on the spot. He'd be the MacGyver, Johnny on the spot fixing it. And so I kind of went along those lines.
Modified eliminator. We move into another category.
Just like two totally different lives. And I've told other people that it was life before racing with Buddy and Dave and Reher and Morrison, and life after. And it's just been two totally different lives. I mean, they're just as separate as they can be. Living in Michigan, working at McLaren, moving to Texas, working with Buddy and Dave and the team, and going to races. Just, yeah, I could have never have envisioned it. I guess the most misunderstood is how much I care about the things that I'm involved in, whether it be racing or restoring cars. I'm highly motivated, and I'm somebody that just will work until I can get it done. And you know, I think from a golfing, I played golf when I was in high school and was on a golf team. And one of the things that you learned about golf was to keep your emotions in check. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And observing other people, and Lee Shepard was one of them, you could see that in people. There's some people that, they're just so mad and angry, and when they do bad, and they're just on top of the world when they're doing good. And you know that somewhere in between there is kind of really where you should kind of land. So I think observing other people and seeing how they handle situations and kind of grounded me. Buddy and Dave and I knew each other from racing. I raced modified, and I also had them involved in the Buick V6 Indy program when I worked at McLaren. And when it got time to move up to pro stock, and that's every door car modified comp eliminator guy is most everybody's a pro stock wannabe. And I had a chance to. I bought the '81 Camaro that they raced, and at the time I had a partner, Jim Hanley, and he and I bought that car with the idea that we were going to race pro stock. So I had a little bit of background with Buddy and Dave, and I knew Lee, and I knew Lee was a good athlete, and I kind of, I wouldn't say studied, but I kind of observed him. I went to some races with him. I went to Mile and Dragway and different places, and you can just get a sense of, if that's what you're trying to do, is look around and see what's going on, and I kind of did, and could get an idea of where Lee and Buddy and Dave all fit in.
These are the 16 quickest pro stock qualifiers here at the Gatornationals. As you will note, it is a missing man formation out of respect for the late Lee Shepard. We ask everyone to join in a moment of silence as a tribute to Lee Shepard.
You never think that things like that are going to happen to somebody that you know. And one of the hard things for me was seeing how it affected Buddy and Dave. And I didn't know them anywhere like I do now, obviously, but I could tell, and I think the whole racing community, before I really knew about it, I was in Gainesville in 1985, and I was making my first race in pro stock, and that just tore my heart out, that my idol, the person I looked up to, was gone. And even though we all know that can happen at any time, when it does, that's very emotional.
Bruce Allen, Lapeer, Michigan. He has been hired as the new driver for the Reher and Morrison team Chevrolet.
Tell me how that whole deal went down and how you reacted.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have applied for the job at all because I was not worthy of doing that. I had absolutely no experience to speak of. And that was, I mean, they had won the last 4 NHRA championships and the last, I don't know, couple IHRA too. And knowing what kind of shoes that was to fill, I knew that I wasn't worthy of that position. So I never considered it. I didn't even think in my wildest dreams that they would ever ask me to do it. And when they did, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. But then when the reality of it was I'm not sure I want to do it like that. It'd be a lot easier to go do something like that if Lee would have retired, if he'd have been your mentor. You could have talked to him, and you could have went back and had him help you with some of the situations that were going to come up. Not only with racing, but with Buddy and Dave, because the driver's kind of like the quarterback in a football team or something. You get a lot of the attention, and good or bad, deservingly, you know. So I didn't really, I mean, it was a gut check to even decide whether or not that was something I really wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to do it, but whether or not I thought I could be successful doing it. So I was more scared than anything, I would say, to be honest.
'85 Cajun Nationals, you're in a Camaro with the name Reher and Morrison on the side. You're officially the guy.
Yeah.
Take me through the emotions of that first run in that first race.
Oh, you know, it's something when I don't dwell in the past very much. I try not to, but a lot of times things like that do pop into your mind, and especially Baton Rouge because it was the first. But we had gone out to Kennedale prior to that. They already had a fast car. I mean, they were capable of winning. I wasn't. We went out to a local track here, Kennedale, and Buddy and Dave were the idea was they would help me with starting line procedures and staging first, staging second, kind of how to handle that. And we went out there and worked for at least one day, and I'm not sure if it was more but at least one full day of Dave staging with his foot, Buddy or Dave, and then me using the car. And then they would kind of maybe flip their foot in and out of the beam to get the beam to go on and off, and I'd stutter step I'd put it on the floor, kind of getting me ready for. They knew what to expect, I didn't. So ironically, probably the best thing that could have happened was at the Cajuns. On the very first run, partway down the track, I could just kind of feel the car flattening out. And I had probably one of the things that they did like about them was I had a pretty good seat of the pants feel, because I'd raced for a long time and I was racing with my own stuff, so you had to kind of pay attention. And I had a pretty good feel for it, and I said, it's like it's running out of fuel or something. And we started looking the car over, and sure enough, it had a bad fuel pump, and that's exactly what it did. Is it got down in pulled it over in fourth gear and just kind of laid down. So we put a fuel pump on, and the very next run, it was either I think back then you may have ran, we might have ran one Thursday and one Friday and two Saturdays, it was a little bit different sequence then. But anyway, when we went back out there the next run, I think we went from either being real low qualifiers and went right to the top of the pack, and then we ended up, I think we qualified number one at that race. I'm not positive. If we didn't, we were one or two. So probably having something like that kind of made it easier for me, because all of a sudden we were going to work on the car instead of thinking about what could be or what are you going to have to do. And I remember at the time not trying to get lights, because I knew how important it was to stage shallow and make a good run. And to me, that was going to be the hardest thing for me to do. Little did I know how hard it was going to be to get good lights, but that was the most important thing, was getting the car qualified. And Buddy and Dave, neither one of them were somebody that thought you needed to go up there and try and get a light every qualifying session at the time.
Did you feel Lee's spirit in the car with you?
I always said that. I felt like Lee was with me and helping me through what was a tough time in my life. And I always felt like he was the person that was giving me comfort, along with the good Lord. But Lee being there, I could almost talk to him. In fact, I probably did talk to him, because once you close the door, it's you. It's just you in the car, and you got to put your mind somewhere to be able to do a decent job. And I actually felt like I could feel his presence.
Were you ever nervous that what happened to him might happen to you?
I was not. I was never nervous about what would happen to me, because both Buddy and Dave, the very first time before we ever raced, talked to me about what they thought happened. And the number one thing that they instilled in me was I was not going to drive without a full face helmet. And I'd never had a full face helmet before. A lot of people didn't. And they went through one time on what they thought happened, and then we never talked about it again. But through that, we had bigger seat belts. Instead of, I think, 2-inch belts, we had 3-inch belts in the car. Had a crotch strap, had a full face helmet. Actually, the very next car we had a funny car cage in it. So they were really concerned about safety, way more than I was. But them being like that made me aware of it, for sure. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of. I guess that's always in the back of your mind that could happen. But if it does, I kind of feel like that's in God's hands. I really do. I think that our time here is one that we should take advantage of the situations we have, and if it's your day, the good Lord's calling you home, you're going. So.
professional poise here, leaving just a little bit of the expert ahead of the expert Butch Leal, and going on to a convincing victory. So, there it is. You've got your winner here in the Mr. Gasket Pro Stock Final, and it's the young man from Michigan, Bruce Allen. On to victory here. An excellent race.
Well, there's a man that's $15,000 richer. Bruce Allen is the Mr. Gasket Pro Stock Challenge champion. Congratulations.
Thank you. Feels good. That's for Buddy and Dave.
They were very confident going to the starting line. Not nervous at all, just had total trust in you.
Yeah, they make it pretty easy for me. They sure, I can't tell you how important that is. Those two guys just, boy, they give me all the confidence in the world, and they just tell me that I can do it, and that just sure makes it easy.
A lot of the folks down here, maybe wagering a bob or two one way or the other, all thought that Leal would leave the starting line first and you'd drive around it. You left first by 200. You did it all.
Well, Butch is an awful good driver. It's awful hard to beat him, and that just makes you all the more pumped. You know, you go up there knowing that you've got to leave on time, and that just, it's always a great race.
You, my friend, are an awfully good driver as well.
I'm still the weak link in our organization, but I'm going to improve.
From what people know of me, it's mostly from racing. And if they could get back and look and see how honored I was to be in a position that I was, and be humble because I knew what was ahead of me. I knew that the standards that were already there, it was going to be hard to live up to. So it kind of made me be a little more humble and not so much about me, you know.
Butch Leal on the far side. Let's watch him, Shirley.
The launch was even. They're side by side. It looks like it's going to be pretty close all the way down. Neither driver knows who's going to win.
In the near lane, it's Bruce Allen with an ET of 761 and a top speed of 180.65 miles per hour.
And the same finish as Montreal. Bruce
Allen replacing Lee, which was impossible to do, was I had made it my goal to be Bruce Allen and not be trying to be Lee Shepard. I knew I couldn't do that, so all I could do was be me and hope that was good enough.
You went out and won like four races in a row, yet you still considered yourself the weak link in the whole deal. Why?
I felt like I was a weak link because Buddy and Dave had spent their life and their career based on building a program, and they had everything in place. Between Lee and Buddy and Dave, sponsorship from Rick Hendrick and all the good people they had behind them. I just felt like I couldn't let them down, and I felt like I was blessed to be in a position to win a race, but I felt like I needed to do that for them more than for myself. And I did feel like I was the weakest link because they already had everything in place. I was just getting in the driver's seat and doing what I was supposed to do.
At what point did you not feel like the weak link anymore?
I felt like the weak link for a long time, and actually the first year we had a lot of success. We won quite a few races, and I just started to get comfortable with that, and then kind of like the sophomore jinx where you kind of don't do as good as you did the year before. And in this sport, people were catching up, to be honest, but at the time you don't see it that way. Every time you lose, when somebody leaves on you and you get beat or something, you do something stupid, then you go back in your mind thinking that would Lee have done that? And I don't know, it took a long time to get comfortable with where I was.
What's your emotional trigger?
People, past, like now thinking about my dad, thinking about Deb's, my wife's mother and dad. Actually, one of the things is how somebody else feels. I think people's feelings have always been important to me, but when I look back and think that what happened to me affects somebody else in some way, good or bad, those kind of things make me emotional.
You know, one of the things when we were doing the legend of Reher, Morrison, and Shepard, David was very, what I want to say, succinct when he said, you need to include Bruce in that legend too, because yes, it was Reher, Morrison, Shepard, but Bruce held a valuable role. How does that make you feel when you hear that?
Oh, when Dave talks about our relationship and if I help them in any way through the tragedy of losing Lee, that's all I could ask for. And actually, when I thought about that, when we would be at a race, and I would think, these guys, this is going to be tough on them. How can I be a help instead of a hindrance? And I always felt like for the longest time that I was the weakest link in the organization. And Dave or Buddy never made me feel like that. And I can't imagine where I would be. And I don't know, you don't know what the future holds, but I have no idea where I would have gone had this not all came around the way it did.
Being on top means taking the cars to the technical edge of the envelope. Of the 4 top contenders, Bruce Allen is the only hired gun. He took over the driving chores of the famed Reher and Morrison Chevy Camaro following the untimely death of Lee Shepard in 1985.
When Lee was racing, he used to beat Bob Glidden like a drum.
Yeah.
How intimidating was Bob Glidden for you, the new kid on the team?
As a kid growing up watching Lee race Bob Glidden and knowing what kind of rivalry Ford and Chevy and how Bob would be the champion, then Lee would get the championship, and I thought about that, but I knew that I really wasn't in a position to control that very much. Glidden was awful fast in 85 and 86. I remember in 86 when we went to the World Finals, he had about 700 or 800s on the second car. He was extremely fast. And you don't just, traditionally, maybe those kind of, it's a word I'm looking for, rivalries are set up from things that happened, and those guys match raced, and they spent a lot of time racing each other, good and bad. I didn't have that. I just, all of a sudden, I'm racing Bob Glidden. And what I tried to do was just not think about it, because for me it seemed like it worked better just worrying about what I had to worry about than trying to put any more on my plate. I really, it took a long time of racing, several years, before I ever felt like, okay, I'm gonna beat Bob Glidden. To start with, it's like to beat anybody.
Bruce Allen in the right lane, Kenny Koretsky in the left lane, in one of the most horrific crashes we have ever seen. What happened here, Mike? Well, what happened was Bruce Allen in the right-hand lane got the car a little bit loose, and it moved over towards wall out of the groove. When he went to correct, it was basically with no downforce. It rotated the rear end of that race car around, trying to spin it out. But then when he hits the rubber in the middle of the racetrack, he tips it up on his side. Kenny Koretsky just basically T-bones him in just a horrific accident right there. You can see it. You can hear how violent this crash.
When you had your crash with Kenny Koretsky, did you think you were going to die?
Fortunately, I mean, like I've been saying, I think a lot of things happen for a reason, and that particular crash, and whether death was in it for me or not, I didn't know. And I've never said this publicly. I've probably told a couple people this in a one-on-one just between them and me, and I've never, but I don't know if it would have made any difference had I died, to me, because when that happened, I was unconscious, and I had no knowledge of it at all. In fact, I don't remember anything after strapping the belts on and getting in the car. I don't remember a thing. My wife, Deb, always gave me a kiss before I'd get in the car, and she'd walk off. And I remember that, but then I don't remember a thing. And because of that, I think, we're talking about emotions here too, that's what I think about. I think if something would have happened to me, David, wife Deb, they would have been more affected than I would have. I wouldn't have known any different, I don't think. That would have just been it. So, I don't know. It's kind of a, I don't have a specific answer for that. If
knowing what they've already been through, if something would have happened to you and how much you meant to them.
And I do think about what my wife and Dave would have gone through. I think about it, and that is one thing I get emotional about. And in respect for my wife, when that was over, she said, you know, we've done this for quite a while, and we were already that was going to be our last year. And people might not believe that, but we had already committed to the year with Speedco and Pontiac, and we weren't going to race anymore. And at the end of the year, we were just going to be done. And my wife asked that I be done, and as in, don't go drive for somebody else, don't go out and make some runs just to prove that you can, because people have said that I've lost my nerve with that accident and that I just didn't race anymore because I was scared, and they can think what they want. But it was really for respect for Deb, because that, I think between her and Dave, that would have been pretty hard.
Was it still in your heart to race?
Our racing career was about done. We couldn't keep up. We couldn't race the way we needed to be competitive. And people that race just as hard as the people in all forms of race, everybody works hard to do it. And when you've had success and then you're still working hard and can't do it, and you can make excuses, you can say you don't have the money, you don't have sponsorship, but your priorities in life change too. The most important thing in your life may not be going to the next race. And so I think priorities had changed, and it took a while, I'll be honest with you. It took probably the rest of that year and a few races in the following year to actually think that, okay, I'm good with this. We're done. I'm not going to race anymore. But one thing I think that I did that I am good at is when I'm done, I'm done. It was like, that's good enough. I may have not had as much success as what could have had, but I don't think I would have had any more racing longer, and I was good with, it was a good place to stop.
Another first-round winner, 27-year-old Bruce Allen of Lapeer, Michigan.
I do think God had a plan for me. I think you can be a witness for God without being somebody that gets up on the podium and preaches. I don't think everybody needs to do that. I think people can look at you and they can, you can honor Christ by being a good person, doing unto others as they would for you. I think when my days are done and people look back at my life, I'd like them to think that I was a good person, that I thought of other people. I wasn't so self-centered that I didn't look at a little guy and like I was. I tried to do that even at the races. I'd go through the sportsman pits. I'd see people that I grew up with racing and encourage them and let them see that I was just lucky, that it could have been them.